Kira became a mom early in life. She was just 20 when her son was born. Her husband, Dave, was already 27 back then, well-established at work and ready to support a family. But raising a child quickly wore them out, and they never found the energy or desire to have a second. Meanwhile, their son, Tim, grew up restless and fussy. Yet by the time he reached adulthood, he seemed to transform from an ugly duckling into quite the swan. Tim had a close friend, Max. The two were practically joined at the hip, constantly hanging out, playing sports, doing homework together. Kira and Dave got so used to having Max around that they barely noticed him anymore until he left for college in another city. A few hundred miles away, Tim chose a local university. So he stayed at home while Max disappeared from their day-to-day lives until one summer when Tim's old friend returned to town for vacation. At the time, Kira had been out of the workforce for years. When Tim first started school, Dave had convinced her to quit her job and focus on being a homemaker. Meanwhile, Dave worked in construction and led his own crew. They were in high demand. So when an opportunity rose on the other side of the country with generous pay, he accepted. Kira wasn't surprised. She believed her husband had earned that level of trust. So Dave left to oversee a job far away. It was a scorching summer when Max showed up at their doorstep. He was back home for the entire break. The moment Kira saw him, she froze in surprise. Before her stood a handsome young man, barely recognizable as the teenage buddy who'd once hung round her living room. She invited both Tim and Max in for tea, and as they chatted, Kira kept stealing glances at Max. Thought he was poised and confident now, not the awkward boy she remembered. And that realization stirred something inside her. Dave had already been gone for 3 weeks, and she told herself maybe this was just loneliness talking. "What'll you do when you finish school?" she asked Max. "Head back here," he replied. "My dad promised me a job at his firm. That's why I'm studying." "What I'm studying?" His easy grin made something flutter in her stomach. The long months of summer vacation stretched ahead. Whenever Tim and Max weren't working, they hung around Tim's place, escaping the heat with the AC blasting, sipping cold drinks and gaming. Each time Kira caught a glimpse of Max's bare torso, she'd feel a little tremor of excitement. Late at night, she'd shower and behind the curtain, fantasize about Tim's friend. Meanwhile, Dave called whenever he could, apologizing for leaving the family for so long. But he insisted it was worth it, wanting them never to want for anything. Kira told him the usual stuff. Max had come back. Tim had found a part-time summer job. Everything was fine. She never mentioned how Max had morphed into a striking young man, or how she secretly kept her distance, wary of letting her attractions show. She wasn't planning on really cheating. But one day Max turned up unexpectedly at the house. Tim was at work. Kira answered the door, surprised that Max seemed unaware her son wasn't home. He held out a small bouquet of flowers, clearly picked from a nearby bed, and she couldn't help but blush. "Thanks, Tim won't be home till 5. You can wait for him in his room," she offered. "Actually, I'm not here for him," Max said, his voice taking on a quiet, meaningful edge. Kira's heart skipped a beat. Did he feel what she felt? Sure. She looked good for her age, but she still couldn't believe the attraction might be mutual. And yet, had she not been daydreaming about just this scenario for days? Inside, the angel part of her screamed that she should slam the door in his face, call him out for being way out of line. The devil whispered that nobody would ever know, and it wouldn't hurt to take a chance. She feigned confusion. "Then who did you come to see, you?" It was like a jolt of electricity running through her. The forbidden fruit is always the sweetest. From that day on, they secretly met whenever the house was empty. Kira was intoxicated by this feeling. Max made her feel young again, free of the insecurities she'd had about her body and age. But she was also racked with guilt each evening when Dave called on video chat, and she'd break down in tears afterward. Dave, none the wiser, noticed something. different in his wife. She'd become flirtier, friendlier on their calls, and he was thrilled, chalking it up to some personal growth on her part. Summer rolled by, and eventually the break ended. Max had to go back to school. Both had known their fling was strictly short-term, yet as the deadline approached, the looming end of their affair weighed on them. Kira wavered constantly between two men, her devoted husband, far away but forever beloved, and the young lover in her bed. Every time Max left, she scolded herself for succumbing yet again. Time was running out though, so when Tim finally had a night shift at work, Kira invited Max over for one last night together. They lost themselves in each other, exhausted and forgetting everything else, eventually falling asleep in her bed. They were woken by Tim's outraged voice. He'd come home from work early and, to his shock, found his mother naked and asleep, lying in his best friend's arms. He simply couldn't believe Max would do something so vile. Furious, Tim cursed at them both, unleashing a torrent of profanity that left his mother speechless. She'd never heard him speak like that. Max, groggy, stumbled around trying to dress, cursing under his breath as he searched for his clothes. Tim grabbed his phone and tried calling Dave, who initially wasn't picking up. Finally, Dave answered. Tim put his dad on speaker, pointing the camera at Kira and Max so that Dave could see with his own eyes. Tim felt no sympathy for his mother. She'd brought this on herself. Fueled by anger and a sense of loyalty to his father, Tim took grim satisfaction in exposing her lies. Dave wouldn't return home for another month. Kira spent that time on tenterhooks, dreading his rival and the inevitable confrontation. Tim, having vented all he had to say, packed a bag, left for his girlfriend's place, and completely ghosted Kira. No calls, no replies, alone in the house. Kira waited for the blow-up that would shatter what remained of her life. When Dave finally showed up, he looked haggard, unshaven, thinner, and visibly seething. The moment Kira saw him, she rushed over in tears, begging forgiveness. He ignored her. "Pack your things," was all he said, his voice cold, not even bothering with a greeting. "I'm filing for divorce." Pleading and tears did nothing to change his mind. He'd shut down emotionally, and Kira knew there was no arguing. They quickly divided their assets and parted ways for good. Kira had a tough time adjusting to life on her own. Her ex-husband and her son both refused any contact. Max, who'd once spoken about building a future together, disappeared after blocking her number. So, in the end, the woman who'd betrayed them all found herself betrayed in turn.